My name is Cecil and I'm an alcoholic. I was thinking about this deal. I've been watching everybody, and I've been really, really impressed with you people. And I was thinking about Alcoholics Anonymous and how far it's come. And I was thinking that, you know, what if something happened to this? And then I thought about the only thing that can really happen to it is ignorance and apathy. Ignorance of what we belong to and straight old apathy. Not complacency, but apathy. And I discussed that with David, and I asked him what he thought of it. And he said he didn't know and he didn't care. And he was one of your trusted servants. So you made a bad choice. I, like the rest of the speakers except one, didn't get my fruit basket. They weren't even going to give me a room. And people have been asking me if I like my room and if I like the fruit basket, and no use lying, I didn't like it because I didn't get it. And I'm on a special diet, and I had to have some fruit, so I went down and bought some. But what the heck, it was only $3. I won't put on my expenses. I've also been watching the committee, and I know they've had special meetings and everything, and they are doing a real fine job. I haven't seen them have any fights. I know they've had some, but at least they go in a back room to have them. And I think that's a great thing, you know, and you can always tell how a conference is going if the committee is getting along real good with each other. And that reminds me of a story. It doesn't really, I intended to tell it all along. And I was watching the golf up on my television, and it's a story about a golfer that had a bad day golfing. And he went into the clubhouse, and he's sitting there, and he said, "Oh, God," sitting there all by himself, and the voice came down, just like David's voice came down, and said, "Yeah, what's trouble?" And he looked up and he said, "Is that you, God?" And God said, "Yeah, that's me." "What's trouble?" And he said, "Well, I just can't putt." So God said, "Well, tomorrow when you're out, you know, move your right hand around a little bit maybe and keep your head down. I'm sure everything will be all right." So while he had him on the line, he thought he'd better ask him something else. And he said, "Tell me, God, do they have a golf course up in heaven?" And God said, "Just a second, I'll check." And he went away, he came back. He said, "I have some good news and I got some bad news." He said, "First of all, for the good news, they've got the most beautiful golf course that I've ever seen." The golfer said, "Well, what could be the bad news?" And he said, "Your tee-off time is 10 after 8 tomorrow morning." So it's kind of important, you see, that, you know, that we are on good terms with each other, because we really never know when our tee-off time is going to be. And so I hope that we'll all be good and kind to each other during the balance of this beautiful convention. When I came in, I was having a difficult time getting my room and getting up to my room, and I heard some people talking, and they said there is a Canadian speaker. I wonder where he is. And being a very humble man, I just stood and listened and didn't identify myself. And so That too reminds me of a story. And I tell this story only because Nancy has heard it 22 times and still doesn't understand it. It's a story of a dear old lady that went downtown one day and she bought a parrot. She took this parrot home and found out the parrot couldn't talk. And she'd paid a lot of money for the parrot. So she set about teaching this parrot how to talk. And finally she got the parrot to say 3 words. And those 3 words were, "Who is it?" All day long, sometimes at nighttime, the parrot would say, "Who is it? Who is it? Who is it?" And the old lady got a little upset, listening to this all the time, but after all, she'd paid a lot of money for the parrot, and she had taught the parrot to talk, and so she put up with it. But one day she went downtown. While she was downtown, a knock came to the door, and the parrot says, "Who is it?" A voice came back and says, "It's the plumber." Parrot says, "Who is it?" And he says, "It's the plumber." Parrot says, "Who is it?" And he says, "It's the plumber, Plumber, plumber." Parrot says, "Who is it?" Plumber said, "Look it, you told me to come here, you had an emergency, I couldn't come, but I came anyway, so open the door and let me in because I'm a busy man." Parrot says, "Who is it?" And the old plumber wasn't on the program, and he just completely lost his serenity, and he just got so frustrated and mad, he just fainted dead away right in front of the door. The old lady came home, and she looks down at this fellow laying there, and she looks down, and she said, "Who is it?" And out of the house came a voice, and it said, "It's the plumber." So I'm not the plumber, but I'm your speaker for tonight, and I guess I better get on with it. Not going to tell you a whole lot about my drinking. First of all, I don't like drunkalogs. And I'm not going to talk too long because I'm sure you don't like talkalogs. But I can tell you this, I did drink. I'm not here by mistake. Didn't drink for a whole long time, but I drank. I grew up in a very poor home, grew up during Depression, and I was a good student, and I was a good athlete. I didn't smoke, I didn't drink because I wanted to be a better athlete. But somewhere along the line, when I was about 16 years old, here is what happened to me. And I found it in the doctor's opinion. It says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic lives seems the only normal way. And then it says they are restless, irritable, and discontented. I had never had a drink, and all of a sudden I got restless, irritable, and discontented. I didn't like discipline, didn't like the discipline in my home, didn't like the discipline in my school, I didn't like the discipline in my church, and so I ran away from discipline. And to show you how smart I was, I ran into the Army. Not really a smart move. And the first night that I was there, got this nice uniform on, went downtown with the rest of the men, and we went to a beer parlor. And man, oh man, something great happened to me. All of a sudden, I wasn't that little farm boy that came in from the farm a day before to join the Army. I was a great conversationalist. Somebody said something I didn't like, and all of a sudden I got a few muscles, and I told him where to head in. Then we went to a dance. And oh my God, you should have seen me. I was Canada's own Fred Astaire. For the benefit of the younger members, he was a good dancer. I took a gal home after the dance, and I was Charles Boyer and Clark Gable and all those great lovers of that time. But the next morning I woke up in that little old army floor, and I was the same as I'd been the day I came in. I was scared. But every night we went downtown and did the same thing, and I thought it was just great. I did well in the Army. I became an instructor. But when I was 17, I got kicked out of the Army. I went back home and I worked in an aircraft factory. And I had a good job, but I got responsibility, which I don't really like and still don't really like it today. And I became restless, irritable, and discontented with this job. And I ran away from this job. And I joined the Army once again. Told them I'd never been in before. By this time I was lying a little bit. And I became an instructor immediately. I'd love to stand here and tell you that I was an officer in the Canadian Army, but I got kicked out before I went to officers training. And I went back to my hometown and got a job in a newspaper working in the advertising department and just loved it. I was out in the streets selling advertising, talking to people, going into bars and doing what I wanted to do. And then I got too much responsibility in that job. And once again I became restless, irritable, and discontented. And I ran away once again. And I ran into the Navy. And there I settled down to a bit of serious drinking. Told them I'd never been in the service before. Got recommended for my commission, went away to officers training, but I got kicked out of officers training. It seems that the officer that was in charge didn't appreciate me telling him what to do with his ship. And David talks about he and I have been spending a lot of time in Florida. One day I was looking at one of those big ships, and it's really a physical impossibility to do with that ship what I told him to do with it. But I didn't get kicked out of the Navy, I just got kicked out of officers training. And I became a gunner on a merchant ship. And I sailed all over the world and I drank all over the world. I sailed with a lot of your people. We had a ship come from eastern Canada, go through the Panama Canal, and go to New Zealand and Australia, and we had a cargo of liquor. Canadian Club. We traded that down there for champagne and came home. We had a beautiful trip, I think. And I stayed on that ship because it was, you know, sort of like a pleasure cruise. And while I was down there, I want you people to thank me for this because I helped some of your people out. I was, our ship, we just unloaded in Melbourne, Australia, and one of your ships got torpedoed, and they salvaged it and brought it back in. And the government ordered our ship to take your tanks, I don't mean your drunks, I mean real, genuine tanks, up to New Guinea. And we took them up there, and the Japanese people were a little narrow about us coming in there, and they were shooting at us, doing a lot of strange things. And we unloaded your tanks, and I'd like you to thank me for that. And we started back from Melbourne, Australia. And our own aircraft came out to meet us and escort us in. And we thought it was the Japanese people coming back. And the old captain, who was drunk like the rest of us, he told us to open fire. And we started shooting at our own planes. Now, he was up on the bridge, and I'm down here on the charge of a forward gun. And all of a sudden, the gunnery officer realized that we were shooting at our own planes, and he got real panicky. I don't know why. We weren't hitting them. And you have to visualize this. He's standing up there and he's got this big megaphone and he screamed down and he said, "Cease fire!" So I fired. Kept the war going for a couple more years. While I was in that Navy, I got married to a beautiful little girl. Some of you people have met her. I was in 1943, and I just called her a few minutes ago, and that's 46 years ago, next month, that we got married. I want you to know in this day and age, that's a pretty good record. I still call her my current wife just to keep her in shape. And I'd like to tell you that I was a good husband and a good father, but I wasn't, because by this time I was alcoholic. After the war, I went back home and started getting jobs, started losing jobs, drinking, didn't think there was anything wrong with it because it seemed that everybody was celebrating the end of the war. I celebrated the end of the war, celebrated the beginning of the Korean War, and I probably celebrated the end of that, I don't know. I became a fighter. The last 2 years that I drank, I had 17 fights and 17 knockouts, and I lost them all. I wasn't fighting in any rings or anything, I was fighting in bars. Because by this time I'd become very arrogant. And I didn't like myself, and naturally if you don't like yourself, you don't like anybody else. And I picked a lot of arguments, and I got a lot of fights. I also started to gamble a whole lot. I played a lot of poker in the service, and I started to do it real bad the last 2 years of my drinking. And I tell that story because that's what brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous. One night in a poker game, I did an unforgivable thing. I got caught cheating. It's okay to cheat a bit, but don't get caught, where I come from. And I got caught by a big guy that'd been in the service. He weighed 275 pounds, and he'd been an ex-commando, and he and I had a fight. Or I should say, he had a fight. He hit me, and I hit the cement floor, and I got up, and he hit me, and I hit the cement floor, and we did that a whole bunch of times. And finally, I just stayed down because I couldn't get up. And I went to hospital. And I was beat up. I was in hospital for 5 days. And I'm today a pretty good citizen of my city. But at that time, nobody but nobody came to visit me. I guess they just didn't know I was there. Not even my family. But my little doctor who I'd been in the service with, thank God for that. He sat on my bedside one morning after the 5th day, and he told me, "Cecil, you were a bad drunk when you were in the service. Things are worse since you came home." He said, "I've built you up physically, and I can't do anything more for you. So the rest is up to you." And I said, "Well, what should I do?" And he said, "I would suggest that you join Alcoholics Anonymous." He didn't leave it at that. That night he sent 2 people to see me. I hadn't asked them. They just came. The doctor sent them. And I knew both of these people. One was the sloppiest drunk in all of Canada, I'm sure. And that night he was dressed up and he was clean and he looked good. The other guy was a fellow I'd been in the service with, and he'd come back from the service, got in trouble and got into the penitentiary and found Alcoholics Anonymous in the penitentiary. And he too looked good. And they talked to me. And they talked loud. And I would try to change the subject because I didn't want anybody in that hospital to know I was a drinker. I come from a town of 35,000 people. And so they didn't change the subject when I changed it. They just kept right on talking. And then they told me that the next morning they were going to have a meeting and I could join them. I know why I became an alcoholic. I became an alcoholic because I'm a Protestant. And don't laugh, you Catholics. I lived in a Catholic community. I was one of the very few Protestants that lived there. And they treated me bad. They even called the bingos in Latin so that I couldn't understand them. And here I am in a Catholic hospital. It was before Medicare in Canada, and I'd given them a bad check for a private room. And that little nun couldn't find a place to deposit the check, and she wouldn't let me out of hospital until such time as I paid for the check. And I can remember phoning the only person that my credit was any good with, and that was my bootlegger. And he came up in his taxi and got me out of hospital. And I went to a meeting. He took me to this meeting in this old restaurant. At that time, there were only about 15 people in the group in that town, and they all came to the meeting on Saturday morning. Because you see, in those days, when you got a live one, you all come. And they came, and I knew every one of them. And I wish you could have seen me that morning. I don't really, but, you know, I was a bad mess. And my clothes, there was blood on them, and my suit was torn, and my shirt was torn. And I had my overcoat collar up, and I was sitting there so they wouldn't see my clothes. And they came in, you know, and things like, "What are you, cold?" or, and they said a lot of things I didn't appreciate. But I appreciated the fact that they were all so kind to me. That was January the 16th, 1952. And because of you beautiful people, because of a program called Alcoholics Anonymous, because of a loving God as I understand it, I have never had to have a drink since that day. And for this I'm very grateful. After the meeting, they decided they were going to take me home. And I said, no, I'd go home on my own. For that little wife of mine, she was a little narrow about people being away for 5 days. And this had happened to me before, and when anybody came home with me, she always run them off. So I didn't want her to do with these people because they were so nice to me. But they took me home, and there was no Al-Anon at that time. But some of the ladies who had gone to the open meetings had been up to see her. And I can remember walking through that door, and I thought, oh my God, how is she going to act? And she come up and hugged me and kissed me, and she said, "I think everything is going to be okay, hon." If nothing else, that kept me sober for that day. This lady had really changed. And we went to our first meeting that night. It was a Saturday night just like this. And we went, and it was right on the main drag of our town. And I can remember at that time people used to go, we had 2 theaters in the town, they used to go to the theaters and then they would go window shopping. People walk up and down the street. And the people that picked us up, they're talking to these people, and I thought, my God, we're in front of this club room, or it was upstairs, but right in the main street. Finally, I grabbed Babe and I just pulled her in there, and so they wouldn't see us where we were going, and I went to this meeting. And I'll tell you what, then I looked around at these characters that I'd met in the morning, and they were all old people. Hell, some of them were 40 and 45 and 50 years old. And here I am, 27, and I'm thinking, oh, what did I get myself into, you know? And then they had a social before the meeting, and they started to play games. And I can remember them playing Pin the Tail on the Donkey. This really wasn't my idea of a Saturday night, I'll tell you. And then they had a meeting. And I remember a guy standing up and saying he's been sober for a year. I knew him. And I just knew that he was lying. And I thought to myself, couldn't be much of a drunk if he can stay sober for a year. But I knew what he did. I knew he was a traveling man. I knew he went out on the road and drank, and then he'd come in and tell his donkey that he was sober, you know. I had him figured out right away. After the meeting, a couple of the old-timers who were sober about 18 months, they took me in another room and they said, Cecil, and at that time you used to hear this a lot, there are no musts in Alcoholics Anonymous, they said, but tomorrow morning there's a meeting here and you must be here. And I'm glad they talked to me like that because, you know, I have never stopped going. I still go to my 2 meetings a week, privileged to do what I'm doing tonight, many, many weekends. And I've remained an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I picked a guy to sponsor me by the name of Elmer. He had sobered up 10 days ahead of me. But I drank with him, and 10 days for Elmer was a long time. By God, I want you for a sponsor. And I want you to know that I've had the same sponsor for 37 years. And I've said that in some big crowds, and I've told people I don't think anybody else in Alcoholics Anonymous can say that. And nobody's ever questioned me yet. And Elmer and I have walked a lot of miles together. David knows Elmer. Elmer runs the prison program where I come from, in the penitentiary. Elmer is 75 years old, and he doesn't know that he's 75 years old. And we are saying to him, well, who is going to take your place, Elmer? You know, is there somebody coming up that can take that job over? Elmer's not ready to quit. He's just a dedicated member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Elmer goes all over the world telling people about his prison program. And he has a good prison program. And I didn't want to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Just didn't want to. I was too young, didn't think I was an alcoholic. And after I met all those old people, I was sure I wasn't. But you know, that first night I went, little Bobby Motherwell, who's now gone to the great roundup up top, put his arm around me, and he said, Cecil, we want you, and we need you, and we love you. I didn't think anybody wanted me, I didn't think anybody needed me, and babe, it assured me that nobody loved me. But that meant so much to me. And you know, tonight, if you see somebody standing around that doesn't look too happy, put your arm around them and tell them that you want them and you need them and that you love them, because it meant so much to me. I remember it like as if it was last night, because it meant a lot. And when I say I didn't want to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'll tell you what I used to think of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was something like the 3 alcoholic rabbits. I don't know whether you have alcoholic rabbits down here or not. We have them back in Canada. I don't mean ordinary Saturday night drunk rabbits. I mean real, genuine alcoholic rabbits. They sit out by the fence with their ears drooping down. And there were 3 of them. And they were called Foot and Foot, Foot and Foot, Foot, Foot. And Foot used to phone him Foot. They'd say, let's pick old Foot, we'll go down to the bar. So Foot and Foot, they'd pick up old Foot, they'd go down to the bar. So one night Foot was sitting talking to Foot, and Foot said to Foot, he said, where's Foot? And Foot said to Foot, he said, well, he's here just a minute. He went outside. So Foot and Foot, they went outside, found poor old Foot was dead. So Foot said to Foot, he said, what do you think we should do with Foot? And so Foot said to Foot, he said, I think we should take him down to the funeral home. So after the funeral, Foot said to Foot, he said, what do you think old Foot died from? And Foot said to Foot, he said, well, I think he was alcoholic. And Foot said to Foot, he said, well, do you think we're alcoholic? And Foot said to Foot, he said, well, we're drinking quite a bit. So Foot said to Foot, he said, do you think we should join Alcoholics Anonymous? And Foot said to Foot, might as well, we got 1 foot in the grave anyway. You know? And that's kind of what I thought about Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought you had to have 1 foot in the grave. And when I looked at all those old people, I believed it. And I stayed sober, by golly, just by pats on the back. They treated me good. I found something in Alcoholics Anonymous right away, just by people patting me on the back and say, you're doing a fine job, young fellow. It was great. We went to deals like this, not nearly as big, but went all over the country, pack as many as we could in a car. Everybody didn't have a car in those days. And we'd go to these deals, and people would say to me, gee whiz, we've heard about you. You're doing a fine job, young fellow. And it was just beautiful. And I stayed sober just by those pats on the back. I found something that I've been looking for all my life. And then a horrible thing happened. Some younger members came in. And they walked right by me, went and talked to the old members. The older members walked by me, went and talked to new members. And all of a sudden, I became a middle member. Now, I don't care whether you're an Al-Anon, Alateen, or Alcoholics Anonymous. One day, you are going to be a middle member. And it's a bad thing. It's just like being a hole in a donut. You're nothing. And I seriously considered going out and having a few and coming back and try to get this treatment again. Thank God I didn't have to do that. So we had a guy in our group at that time by the name of Ernie Sear. Ernie's now gone to that big roundabout top. And we asked Ernie to chair our meetings for 3 months. And Ernie said, well, I'll chair the meetings, providing we do one thing. And we said, what's that? And he said, well, I want the group, as a group, not to discuss these steps anymore, but he said, I want us to do them. And I want you to go through, every one of us as a group, and do the steps, which is a little different than discussing them. And we thought we'd humor old Ernie, so we said, okay. And that's what I want to, share with you tonight. The experience I've had since coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. We went to that first meeting, and Ernie took that big book out, and he told us we had to go home and read the first 57 pages. And we did it. We went home. The next week we came down, and Ernie said, well, now you've read the first 57 pages, and in there, somewhere in there, he said, there was something about a first step where we admitted we're powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. I knew I was powerless over alcohol, but I didn't know that I had an unmanageable life. Nobody had ever told me. See, in those days, a lot of people talked about their drinking. There's a lot of people in my town didn't know a lot about Alcoholics Anonymous. But here we have Ernie, and he's going to make us do these steps. And that is the greatest experience that I have ever had. Because I found out I had an unmanageable life. I had an unmanageable life as far as money is concerned. Now, I know I'm going to be talking about something that's completely foreign to you people in Texas. For you see, I had financial problems. I know you know nothing about them. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous owing $6,200. It's not a lot of money as far as you people are concerned. But in 1952, that's a lot of money. And I didn't owe it for anything. I just owed it. And if ever you sponsor somebody that maybe will have that problem, somebody comes from another state or something, you tell them, by golly, I know somebody, I heard a speaker talk about that one time, and we better discuss it. Phone me if you wish. You see, because financial problems, sober, can get you in a lot of trouble. I was sober and I had a good job. I had a real good job. And my boss got sick and tired of getting phone calls about the money I owed, and me getting phone calls, and he took me to a bank, endorsed the note for me, and he and the bank manager sent all the money out. Didn't let me send it, they sent it. They had Babe and I sign a paper that we would never charge anything, that we would pay cash for everything. 3 years later, he bailed me out for $7,500. For you see, I had a problem as far as money was concerned. And I found out that financial problems have nothing to do with money. Just has a lot to do with ego, has a lot to do with big shot-ism, has a lot to do with pride. I was the type of person that if I owed you $400, I wanted to walk in, pull the bankroll out, and throw it down and say, there's a lousy $400 that I borrowed from you, you've even phoning me about. I had too much pride to go in and say, here's $40, it's all I can pay you this month. And it can get you in a lot of trouble. To show you how much trouble it can get you into, now this is sober, this is not drinking. I went home one day, and by this time, Al-Anon had started. And she had gone into Al-Anon. And at this time, I was becoming very important in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had become an eye specialist. And I went home, and our two little girls were sitting there at lunchtime with us, and Babe said, I thought you said you paid so-and-so. And the great one said, if I said I paid them, I paid them. And she said, well, why would they phone me today and tell me that you haven't paid them? And you know what the great one did, the eye specialist? First of all, I threw my food plate and everything into the sink. Two little girls are looking at me, wondering what's going wrong. Then I got up and removed the phone from the wall and said, they will not be phoning you anymore. And went in the front room and pouted. That's sober. So you see, a lot of people think that unmanageability of your life is just when you're drinking. I think anybody, any dear old Presbyterian lady up in our country, if you give her enough of that flip that I drank, that she'd have an unmanageable life that evening. But I'm talking about being sober. And this is what happened to me. To show you I've changed a bit. A few years ago, quite a few years ago now, I owed a manufacturer $10,000. That's not a lot of money in my business because I'm in the fur coat business. But it's a lot of money in the middle of July when it's about 96 above. And this guy was calling me and he was making threats and he was writing me letters, and finally I decided to write him a letter. And I wrote him a letter and told him that I liked his merchandise. I would like to have fall dating on it, that I had sold some on the layaway plan. But I just couldn't afford to pay him now. And then I threw a little philosophy at him. I told him if I had 10 miles to walk down a railroad track, it'd take a long time. But if I took it a telephone pole at a time, it may take longer, but I'd finally get there. And I signed it, yours truly, Cecil E. Corgle, manager of Cecil Corgle Furs and Fashions. P.S. I'm enclosing a certified check for $100. Sent it away. 4 or 5 days later, I got a letter back. That's when the post office was operating properly. And this man thanked me for the letter, congratulated me on my letter writing ability, suggested that I get out of the fur business, go writing letters for people. Sign it, yours truly, Mo Amsel from Amsel and Amsel, Montreal. P.S. Please send me another telephone pole. And I've sent him a lot of telephone poles. And I still owe him some telephone poles today, probably. But that just doesn't matter. For you see, I found out how to handle things. I had unmanageable life as far as other things were concerned, but I started to work on them because I found out that I had them. Step 2, where it says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I said to some of the older members, I said, well, I'm not insane. I've never been to a mental hospital. How can I come back from somewhere I haven't been? And the guy said, Cecil, it's not the fact that you're insane, it's the fact that you are a negative thinker. And you are really a negative thinker. And I was. I was the type of person that, do you ever see people, I know this probably doesn't happen in Texas either, but 6 or 7, 8 people, they sit around trying to help somebody that's not there. You know? I was always doing that. And you know, you say things like, I heard. Have you heard? Isn't it awful? You know? Well, I was that kind of a person. I was something like the negative barber. Guy slid into the barber chair one day and he said, like a haircut lasted for 3 weeks. The barber said, why 3 weeks? He said, well, I'm going on vacation. The barber said, where are you going? He said, well, first of all, he said, I'm going to London, England. The barber says, you're not going to London, England. He says, I am. He said, you're not. He said, I am. Wouldn't go there if I were you. He says, no, I've never been there, but I heard. Lousy place to go, too many people, too many cars. Guy said, look, I just cut my hair. If I don't like it there, I'm going on over to Paris. The barber says, you're not going to Paris. He said, I am. He said, you're not. He said, I am. He said, I wouldn't go there if I were you. He said, I heard that they really fleece the tourists there. Guy said, look, I don't care. If I don't like it there, he said, I'm going to Rome. Barber says, you're not going to Rome. He said, I am. He said, you're not. He said, I am. He said, I wouldn't go there if I were you. He says, there's too many Catholics over there. Guy said, look, I don't care. I'm a Catholic. Yeah, but he said, I heard there's a different kind of a Catholic over there. 3 weeks later, the guy come back, slid into the barber's chair. The barber said, how was your trip? He said, it was good. He said, it wasn't. He said, it was. He said, you didn't go to London. He said, I did. He says, you didn't. He says, I did. He said, I'd love to stay there long, but want to get on to Paris. He says, you didn't go to Paris. He says, I did. He says, you did. He says, did. And he says, I'd love to have stayed there long, but want to get on to Rome. He says, you didn't go to Rome. And he says, I did. He says, you did. He says, I did. And he says, you'll never believe what happened. He says, I got an audience with the Pope. And he says, you didn't. He says, I did. He says, you didn't. And he says, you'll never believe it. He said, what happened? He says, I knelt down, bent down to kiss the Pope's ring, and you'll never believe what the Pope said. And the barber says, what? And he says, where the heck did you get that lousy haircut? So I was something like the negative barber. I didn't know, but I'd heard. And they told me to pray in the morning, and I said, who to? And they said, doesn't matter, just pray. And I said, what about nighttime? They said, same thing, just pray. And you know, I started to do it. I had an unmanageable life. I found some sort of a manager in step 2. And I did what the rest of the group were doing. And then they told me to make a decision, to turn our will and our lives over to God as we understood him. Not as we understand him, but as we understood him. And that step 3 was a difficult one. You know why? Because I had to make a decision. I don't know about you people, but I still have a difficult time making decisions. Before coming up here tonight, I was trying to decide whether I should go to the bathroom or not. And right now, I don't know whether I've made the right decision or not. And it reminds me of a story. I know you probably haven't got poachers down here, but poachers are people that go and hunt and fish and do those things without a license and out of season. And we have a lot of them back home. And this old poacher, he would do anything and never did get caught. But a new game warden came to town, and he went down, he made friends with this old poacher, and he dressed up in old overalls, and the old poacher became real good friends of his. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the old poacher said, well, I'm going fishing. And his newfound friend, who didn't know was a game warden, said, like, go with you. So they went fishing. They get out in the middle of the stream, and the old poacher stopped the boat, reached over, opened a big tin box, took out two sticks of dynamite, lit them, threw them into the drink. And then if you've done some fishing, you know what happened. Boom, up comes the fish, out came the net, and boom, he fills the old boat, and out came the badge. And the old game warden says, we finally got you. And he starts giving the old poacher a lecture. The old poacher doesn't say a word. Reaches over, gets 2 more sticks of dynamite, lights them, hands them over to the game warden. The game warden's sitting there with 2 lit sticks of dynamite. And the old poacher says, look it, buddy, do you want to talk or do you want to fish? He made a decision. And that's all it asks us to do. In step 3, to make a decision. Many people start looking for God. That's not necessary. It tells you to make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understood Him. A lot of people don't know what our will is. But if you read what your will is on page 63 and go on through, you'll find out what your will is. And when you find out what the will is, you'll want to turn it over. You would want to be like that. And so that's all there was to it. And I went home and I went downstairs and I said it something like this. Look at God, I've done a bad job of managing my life. How about you taking over? And that's what I did. And it worked. You see, I had to keep it simple. Because if I don't keep things simple, I'm in trouble. If I complicate things, I am in trouble. And you've seen a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, Alateen, who complicate things. And it's really puts you in trouble. I have a friend of mine back home that has a ranch. Another friend said, how'd you get the name of your ranch? And he says, well, I wanted to call it the Bar Q. My wife wanted to call it Susie Q. My son wanted to call it the Bar Susie Q. And my daughter wanted to call it Susie Bar Q. So we called it the Bar Q, Susie Bar Q, Bar Susie Q. The guy said, that's a great name, but where are the cattle? And he says, none of them ever survived the branding. So you see, I had to keep it that simple. And I made that decision, and that's the way it was. And then the next week we came back, and Ernie came in there, and I always loved this guy. He came in there and he had a pencil and paper for each one of us. He said he heard somewhere someone say they couldn't find a pencil and paper to take the 4th step. He gave us all a pencil and paper. And we studied the 4th step out of the big book here. On page 65, he showed us the chart, exactly how to do it. And he told us to go home and do it. And we went home as a group. And we would phone each other, how you coming? And everybody was doing their 4th step. And I believe that the only tough thing about a 4th step is getting a pencil and paper. And some of you may say, and this is possible, not down here, but where I come from. It's possible that somebody will have nothing wrong with them. Well, if you ever sponsor somebody like that, just tell them to write that down, nothing. And right underneath, write down that you're a liar. And you've got to start with step 4. And I took that step 4 where it deals with, resentments, fears, and sex. And a lot of people, shy away from it. It tells us that resentments are the biggest killer. And so I resented some of the dearest people in my life. I grew up, to show you how stupid I was, I grew up in depression. And I resented my dear old grandfather for not having any money. There wasn't anybody had any money. But I went through life in the beer parlors saying, if I'd had an opportunity, I could have been this and that, but Grandpa didn't have any money. And I wrote that down. And I wrote everything down, my resentments, my fears. We had a guy that just recently that was doing the steps. He said he didn't have any fears. Well, I said, well, why don't you just write it down? He said, I'm afraid to. We can play games with ourselves. But we wrote it down, and we all came back the next week with our pencils and paper, and we told old Ernie what we'd done, and I even wanted to show it to him. And he said, no, he said, you don't have to show it to me, that's yours. And about this time I had made a friend, great friend, with a fellow by the name of Joe de Gagne. And to show you that keep an open mind and all those things were starting to work with me, this old fellow sold Catholic literature. And he used to spend a lot of time when he came through town with me. And he said, I was telling him about my fourth step, and I said, there's quite a few things wrong with me. And he said, well, what about been right with you? Have you written that down? And he told me what to do. He said, I was at that store you work at. And he said, you seem to have a lot of, responsibility there. A lot of people working for you. A lot of people respect you. He said, we came home in a beautiful car that's a company car. You've got, everything going for you. You have a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful girls, a nice home. You're all healthy. Write all of that down. So I did. And then we went on the next week to do a step 5. And I found the only thing that's tough about step 5 is step 4. The moment I did my step 4, I was hot to go with a step 5. And I can remember going to this little minister. He was Protestant, mind you. And I went to him and I shared everything I had written down. He shared a few things with me because he'd been sort of orangutan too. And we became pretty good friends because of that step 5. And he asked me if I knew what to do. He was an experienced man as far as step 5 was concerned. He said, you know what to do now? And I knew because Ernie had told me that I had to take this book. I had to find a quiet place and I had to read step 6 and 7 after I'd gone over the first 5 proposals to see if I was okay. And it told me that I'm building an archway through which I can walk a free man. Isn't that beautiful? The freedom that I could get. Ernie every week used to read the 12 promises. And he'd say, this is what you're entitled to. Don't gyp yourselves. And he'd tell us about those 12 beautiful promises. And I did that step 5, and I went and read step 6 and 7. And when I read step 6 and 7, I can tell you that that night, there was never a time that I was more ready for God to remove my defects of character. And I humbly asked him to remove my shortcomings. Very simple thing. I was having a difficult time to get down on my knees. And I met a fellow in New York one time by the name of Shy Walker. And Shy told us how he came out of prison, and he told us how he had a difficult time to get down on his knees. And he said quite by accident he was working in construction, and he came home one night and he kicked his boots underneath the bed, his high-top boots. And he said the next morning he went down on his knees to get his boots from under the bed, and he thought, by golly, seeing I'm down here, I'm going to say a few words. And he did. And he said every night he used to boot his boots under the bed, so that the next morning he'd get down on his knees to say a few words. I don't know whether it works with high-top boots, because I didn't have any at that time. But I know it works with ordinary Oxfords, because I tried it. I don't have to do that anymore. I can pray anytime. It's still a very personal thing with me, but I can pray. I'm probably the prayingest member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I got more to pray about than, in gratitude I'm talking about. And you see, the only way that I could get to be a little bit humble was to get down on my knees. And if there's any definition for humility, I would say it would be the ability to stand and the willingness to kneel. The ability to stand up and say what we believe in, and the willingness to get down on our knees and thank God for it. And then we went on to that step 8 where it says we had to make a list of all the people we'd harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. And I said to Ernie, I've already made that list in step 4. He said, cease, knowing you've hurt somebody from step 4 to step 8. See, it's kind of nice in a small town when everybody knows everybody else. And so I had to make another list. I made another list. The next week we went on to step 9, where we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And I went about doing that. And then I realized what Ernie was talking about when I started to do my amends. I realized what he was talking about when he read those promises to us. You know, it's so beautiful. the 12 promises. And when he read them to us every week, it was just so fantastic because I realized that I was entitled to them. And I can make you an absolute guarantee, if you go through these steps in sequence from 1 to 9, that you too are entitled to those promises and that you will get them. I don't mean discuss the steps. I mean do them. But you don't have to. You don't have to do anything. That's the beautiful thing about this program. You can go through life being snarly. You can go through life hating everybody. You can go through life not being a good father or a good husband or a good wife or a good mother. You can just go through life that way if you want. But this program promises us that we can have all of those beautiful things. And it says, you know, on page 83, and I know you've all read it, but it says, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in ourselves. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And those are the promises that are ours. And I'm privileged to stand here and tell you that I've had them. And that's something. Next week we went on to step 10, and I love step 10, where it says we continue to take a personal inventory, and when we're wrong, we promptly admit it. And I love step 10 because of this. When I was sober for 10 years, and I was doing what I was supposed to do, and all of a sudden I forgot who I was and what I was and where I'd come from. I'd been a delegate to the General Service Conference. I had served in all capacities. I was Mr. AA in our community. I would go up to the prison on Tuesday nights, every Tuesday night, and I would think on my way up, boy, these guys are sure lucky that the great one comes up every Tuesday. Go to the meetings with an attitude, something like this: you lucky people, here I am. If somebody wants to discuss some of their problems after, I can probably spend a few seconds with you. I got that sick. Never stopped going to AA. Went there because of my ego. Ego to me is easing God out. And that's what I was doing. I was managing the largest ladies' wear store in the province of Saskatchewan. Incidentally, the province of Saskatchewan is bigger than the state of Texas. Just thought I'd throw that in. And I was looking after the fur department for 5 stores. And one day my boss, who was the wealthiest man in our city, and I decided he should be the second wealthiest, and I got some of those material things, but in my great struggle for them, I started to lose those spiritual things. And one day he called me into the office, and it seemed this big store wasn't quite big enough for the 2 of us. And it seemed that he owned it, and he wasn't about to leave. And he fired the great one. And I can tell you, I walked out of that store that night, and I said, well, they won't last long now. The great one's gone. I want you to know they're still okay. They're still millionaires. They're doing okay. At that time, thank God, I had a little cousin of mine come to visit me. I know she just didn't come to visit me. She came from the west coast of Canada. I know that God sent her. And I was going to a little roundup about 400 miles from where I lived. And I went down to see Fern just before I left, my little cousin. And I stood up in front of her in my big egotistical way with my new threads on, and I said, well, kid, how do I look? And Fern said these simple words to me. She said, you look real good on the outside, Cecil. How are you really on the inside? And I drove away with those words just ringing in my ears. And I went to this conference that I went to. And I went into Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I spent a couple of days in a hotel room just talking to God. I went back to Prince Albert, went in business for myself. That's not important. I had to do something. But I went back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd never been away as far as the meetings went. But I went back with the proper attitude and the proper motives. All because that little gal said that to me. Today I'm so happy about step 10. You don't catch me not doing a step 10 every night. You don't catch me not promptly admitting it when I say something bad to somebody or do something that I shouldn't do, because I don't want to ever go through that again. And you see, step 10 taught me how to love cease. And I went on to that beautiful step 11 where it says, sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as we understand it, as we understood it. Praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. I noticed that there were about 17 more words in that step than other steps. And so I figured maybe there was something a little bit more to it. And one day I was driving to work, and I got in an argument with a fellow that lived 1,300 miles from me, and I had an argument with him on the phone. I was going to meet him in Montreal at the Fur Convention, and I get myself juiced up to have the argument when we hit Montreal. And I started to argue out loud with him. That's not easy to do, because you got to figure out what he's saying, and he's not there. And I know most of the people in our city, and most of the people know me. And I've come to a stop sign, I'd be talking to somebody who wasn't there. And they're looking, a little strange. Wonder what old Cecil is up to today. I got to my store, and I hadn't finished the argument. And I drove around the block a couple of times, because I had some more things to tell him. And at 8:45 in the morning, I got to my store completely exhausted. And I decided I don't want to live that way anymore. So because of step 11, every morning of my life, I read page 86 and 87 and 88. Because it tells me, at step 11, it tells me exactly what to do. It tells me on awakening. It tells me what to do. I read other things. I read Emmett Fox. I may read Vincent Peale. I may read the Bible. I know it's not conference approved, but have a shot at it anyway. And people say to me, well, what time do you get up to do all of that? I call it 7 minutes with God. That's all it takes. I read the promises. I read the 3rd step prayer, page 63. I read the 7th step prayer on page 76. And I read the last part of A Vision for You on page 164. And it tells me how to handle my day. For you see, you never know who's out there to get you. And you got to be ready for them. Because there's people out there that will just aggravate our disease. Sometimes they're not even out there. Sometimes they're right in the house where we're living. They'll say bad things to us. And I'll tell you, that little Scotch wife of mine, she has a difficult time with me, because that is the time she wants to have an argument. And I just won't argue. Sometimes I reacted. This is some time before. And you know what I did? Just when I start to say unkind things, I walk over to her, I kiss her, and say, I'm sorry, honey, I love you, and goodbye. They don't know what to do. They just stand there. And that, when comes 5 o'clock to go home, you don't have to crawl in, you walk in, master of the house. Because of step 11. It's just beautiful. And you know, when I talk about you never know who's out there to get you, there's another old poacher story I like to tell. This old poacher once again was doing everything he shouldn't do, and there was a game warden by the name of Ralph. And old Ralph was trying to catch him, and he couldn't. 5 years he tried, couldn't get him. One night he went out, they bedded down in front of the old poacher's place in the hay, and he thought, well, I'll get him when he comes out. 4 o'clock in the morning, the door opened, and he figures, I'm going to catch him now because he's going to do something wrong. Door opened, and the old poacher poked his head out and said, do you want some breakfast, Ralph? Old Ralph got out of the hay and went in having some breakfast. And he said, how did you know I was out there? And he says, I didn't. But every morning for the past 5 years, I've opened that door and said, do you want some breakfast, Ralph? You see, you got to be ready. And that's why I do it. And I give you an absolute guarantee, just try it for 30 days and you'll keep on trying it because it changes your life. I call it 7 minutes with God. And I want to share something with you that happened one time when I was doing my reading in the morning. I told you about our 2 little girls who now are big girls. And our oldest daughter, Faye, we gave her everything that she wanted. Faye has been sober since 1970. And she just did dirt to us. You'll never believe what she did after we treated her so kind. She married a Catholic. An Italian one. They're the worst kind. And they had a beautiful little daughter. Her name was Anna Louisa. Really not an Anglo-Saxon name. And they lived in eastern Canada just outside of Toronto, and when I was coming home many times in deals like this, I go to visit them. And I got there this time, little Anna's 3 years old. She's all packed, ready to come home with Grandpa. And that's what grandpas are supposed to do. Bought her a ticket, she came home with me. Next morning I'm in doing my reading, and Babe, little Anna, she knocked on the door, and Babe said, you can't go in there, honey, because Gramps is doing his reading. She said, I have something to tell him. So I said, let her come in. She came in, and I took her up on my knee and tried to tell her what I was doing. And I said, well, what did you want to tell me? And she said, I wanted to tell you that I love you. And I said, I want you to know that I love you too. That may not mean anything to anybody, but for this old hard rock that couldn't accept love and couldn't give love, here I am accepting it from a little Catholic girl, and I'm telling her that I love her too. She's 18 years old, going to university. No matter where we see each other, she says, I love you, Gramps, and I tell her I love her too, whether it be on the phone or wherever. She has a little sister. Her name is Chella Maria. They pick some strange names. And she, too, is a buddy. She turned 16 just about 2 days ago. She's got her car now, and she can drive. She's a great friend of Grandpa's. She loves me, and I love her. They have a cousin by the name of Jason. Jason came to the Lone Star Conference with me a few years ago. Jason is a Protestant. He gets to go on trips. And he and I are real buddies, and he said to say hello to everybody that knows him. And he's big in the Sea Cadets. And he's just real big and a good kid. But you know that they've now got him going to a Catholic school. They just don't stop. And you know, he told me when he went to go into high school and he went to this Catholic school, he said, "You know why I'm going there, Gramps?" And I said, "Why are you going there?" And he said, "Because they have a better spiritual program." You know, this is some of the things that Jason and I have talked about. And I'm really grateful about that kid. He'll be 16 in August, and he's going to take his education through the Navy. And maybe he will get that commission. I'm encouraging him. He looks like me, and he walks like me, and talks like me. Let's hope he doesn't drink, because he'll probably drink like me, because he's like me. Jason's mom got divorced from Jason's Protestant daddy, and she too married an Italian Catholic. And they have a little guy, 5 years old. His name is Giovanni Anthony. Hey. I don't know how to spell it, I just learned how to pronounce it. This little guy is my buddy. He calls me Cecil. And Jason's aunt and uncle, who's my oldest daughter, they gave Jason a car for all of the awards that he won in Sea Cadets just recently. And little Gio's nose is a little out of joint about this because Jason got a car. And last Sunday morning, we went to McDonald's early in the morning. And we got home, I had a brand new car, and he's finding all the gadgets. And I got out, and he said, "Cease, come back here, I want to talk to you." And I got back in the car, and he said, "When you go to heaven," he said, "will you give me this car?" I sure hope my tee-off time's not that soon, but I love him. And I could have lost all of that. But because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have it. And it's just beautiful. So you see, in step 11, I learned to love God. I learned to love God the way you're supposed to love God. And it went on to step 12, where it said, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Spiritual awakening to me is simply a personality change. The other morning about 4:30, when I was in the bathroom, if I'd have said, I have to drive 100 miles to catch an airplane, I have to fly to Calgary, then I have to sit on an airplane for 3 or 4 hours to get to Dallas, I'd have been played out before I got out of the bathroom. And I'm having a shave, and you know what I said? I'd done my reading. I said, "Isn't it great? I'm invited back to Texas." And you know, it's great to be invited back, because one time I wasn't invited the first time. And you see, that is a personality change. I don't say, try to just eliminate that deal that I have to do something. I just say, isn't it great that I've got that opportunity to do something? And this is the way that I live. I had to go before a pension commission because I get a pension from when I was in the service. And you had to tell them what's wrong with you. And the little girl that was going to handle the situation for me, she phoned me and said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing." You know, I'm just grateful that I get up in the morning. And she phoned me back and she said, "We have to tell these people, you know, if we want to increase that pension." And I said, "Just tell them that I'm just grateful that I have a pension, but I figured that I should get more because of my condition. The doctor knows what's wrong with me." So we went in, and the people that were on this deal were, they thought I was really a strange one because I didn't complain. See, I don't like complaining because I have nothing to complain about because of this program. And then it says we tried to carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. There are people in this room tonight who are suffering. Just go and tell them. That's carrying the message. Go and tell them that you love them. Spend some time with them. And you will be carrying the message. They may be in Al-Anon, they may be in Alateen, they may be in Alcoholics Anonymous. Tell them that you love them and tell them you need them. And then it says, practice these principles in all our affairs. What principles are they talking about? I believe in step 1 they're talking about honesty. Step 2, I believe they're talking about hope. Step 3, faith. Step 4, courage. Step 5, integrity. Step 6, willingness. Step 7, humility. Step 8, brotherly love. Step 9, justice. Step 10, perseverance. Step 11, spiritual. And step 12, service. And you know, my dear old grandmother taught me a prayer. For many years I couldn't say the prayer, but today I can say it in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can say it when I go to bed at night. And I'll share it with you, and I hope that you can say it every night too, but be careful. Because the prayer is, please God, treat me tomorrow as I've treated everybody today. Be careful with that one. And that's what I think about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm a very, very, very lucky man. I'm lucky because of you people. And I'm lucky because I found out what this program was all about. I've been privileged to serve in every capacity there is to serve. But the biggest privilege I've had is when I finished all those things as being your trusted servant, the biggest thing is belonging to a group. And you know, I've noticed something around as I go around, and as Clancy says, I'm not being a judge, I've just things I've observed. And if you look in the information that comes out from New York, from our General Service office, you'll find out that we are not fully self-supporting. You'll find out, and I know this is not so in Texas, it's a misprint. There's a lot of people not taking the opportunity to support our beautiful fellowship. Probably in the 50%. And you see, if we say we're fully self-supporting and you're contributing and I'm not contributing, we are not fully self-supporting, and vice versa. If I'm contributing and you're not, we're not fully self-supporting. If we're not doing what we're privileged to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, like spiritually, we are not fully self-supporting. And emotionally, because we should be contribute that way too. And there's a story that I used to tell when I was the delegate, and I was trying to get people geared up to throw some money in. It's a story about a young member of Alcoholics Anonymous and an old member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the young member said to the old member one day, he said, I'm going to quit. And the old member said, why are you going to quit? And he says, well, when I came here, they told me it wouldn't cost me anything. They told me I wouldn't have to do anything. Now they want me to go sit with some guy that's at a treatment center. They want me to go to prison to see some people in there. They want me to contribute something to our General Service Conference, to our state assembly, to our district. And he said, I'm getting sick and tired of it, and I'm going to quit. And the old member sat there for a while, and then in his easy-does-it way, he said, you know what? I don't blame you a bit, because your story reminds me of the story of my life. He said, when I was very young, my wife and I were blessed with a bouncing baby boy. And the moment that child was born, he started to cost me money. I had to leave my wife in hospital. I had to take the kid home. I had to hire someone to look after her, someone to look after him. Every time I went downtown, I had to buy something for him. He started to creep around and they wanted toys. Then he started to walk and he wanted a tricycle. Went into public school, the tricycle wasn't good enough, he wanted a bicycle. Then he went away to high school and he really started to cost me money. Extra money to take the girls out, he wanted an old motorcycle. bought him a motorcycle, and he wanted a car, extra money to go away to summer camp for sporting goods equipment. And he said, I was like you. I was getting sick and tired of it. But then he said, in the final year of high school, that boy of ours died, and he hasn't cost us a penny since. Do what you like with that story, folks, but let's keep this beautiful thing that we have alive. And if you are not contributing and don't know what you can contribute, ask somebody, and somebody will tell you. Because we have the greatest opportunity in the world to do something good. And anonymity to me just means that. My good friend Wesley and David's good friend Wesley, and I'm sure your good friend Wesley. He always used to say that anonymity is the ability to forget. Do something good and forget about it and go and do something else. And that's the opportunity we have in this fellowship. And there's a little town just outside of Omaha, Nebraska. It's a little town called Boys Town. And as you drive up, you see a statue. It's a statue of one little boy carrying another little boy. And you can tell by the sweat on his brow and the way he's stooped over that he's having a very difficult time. But underneath are simple words, something like this. No, Lord, he is not heavy, for he is my brother. That's what happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. You are all brothers and sisters. I want to thank the committee for giving me this very pleasurable privilege of coming back to Texas. I want to thank you, the audience, for being such a beautiful audience, because you listened and you made things easy for me. Last but not least, I want to thank God for giving me one more beautiful day to allow me to do something for our fellowship, because I never know when my tee-off time is going to be, and I just want to keep doing it. And I'm going to leave this with you and hope it helps you as much as it's helped me. Every one of you look real good on the outside tonight. How are you really on the inside? Thank you, and God bless.